Jeongguk leaned against the brick walls, standing outside a French boutique for women. The strong hue of sunlight which expanded across the ivory pavement provided comfort at the beginning of an early December. 23rd wild December, and Jeongguk was already awaiting the aurora of spring. He loves Christmas. Not doing so would get one called a lunatic. Yet, something about the idiocy, the craze over materialized goods. As time passes, Christmas became more about gifting rather than family and love. Jeongguk looked inside the tall glass window, peering inside to find Rosie, who was talking brightly to the store clerk, who was coaxing her into buying the dress, which she obliviously believed to be real compliments. She looked pretty, with her hair in a high ponytail, a skirt flailing out a bright green color with an abundance of polka dots on it. Latest fashion, he presumes. Did no one ever tell you to not stare at young women? A voice came, and Jeongguk turned around in an instant, eyes wide. Oh, Jeongguk let out upon seeing who it was. Rosie's in there, I swear. I wasn't just. I'm only joking, Jeongguk, Veronica replied, smirking lightly, looking polished with a beret on her head, a long brown coat and bright red lipstick. You lawyers are so high-strung, she laughed, and Jeongguk let out a nervous chuckle. Rosie came here to buy Christmas presents for her family, yet she's resorted to buying gifts for herself, Jeongguk said, and Veronica laughed. Ah, how lovely, I'll join her, Veronica said, and entered the store, leaving Jeongguk to breathe. Jeongguk looked around. If Veronica was here, Taehyung must be too. He peered across the marketplace, seeing assortments of shops and merchants with carts full of fruit and such. His excitement grew along with a smile on his face when he saw the older boy standing across the street from him. Taehyung was leaning against the wall, right opposite of where Jeongguk stood. The man had his neck craned, blonde hair looking a little longer. He wore a long black coat with thin brown shoes, portraying the quintessential rich man. A cigarette sat between his lips, and his gaze was on Jeongguk, an inscrutable look on his face. Jeongguk was allured. He walked forward with a heavy stride, a jump in his heart, mind forgetting any earlier purpose, motif, reason. Only thinking of Taehyung wanting to meet him, hear the man's voice. Jeongguk stepped onto the road, but the moment he did, a loud honk startled him and a black Chevrolet convertible screeched past him, making him stumble back. The man driving the vehicle stuck his head out the window, angered. "Watch it!" he shouted angrily, and Jeongguk gulped, eyes growing big in worry. He licked his chapped lips and looked back ahead and saw Taehyung gone. This caused his worry to increase. Jeongguk turned around, but when he did, he saw Taehyung there and gasped. "Chow. You must watch out. London streets aren't like the ones in Yorkshire, lamb." Taehyung's deep voice spoke, a look on his face, pleasantly occupied. Jeongguk blushed. "I'm aware," Jeongguk stated, trying not to look as bemused as he felt. The last time he'd seen the older man was the night of the party, which in memory seems foggy, tilted. Every thought of it set Jeongguk's heart racing. "I see Rosie and Veronica have found themselves quite comfortable in there," Taehyung chuckled, looking into the French boutique, and Jeongguk hummed. "I reckon you're stuck with me now. How upsetting," Jeongguk said quietly, and Taehyung smiled. "Well then, aren't you a little sarcastic?" Taehyung asked, and Jeongguk giggled, hands in his pockets, wanting to reach out and grab Taehyung's shoulders. How wide and firm they were. "Only with you, you make me act peculiarly," Jeongguk said, and Taehyung grinned. "Ah, I see my charm is effective, as usual," Taehyung said, and Jeongguk laughed. "Are you trying to make me behave strangely?" Jeongguk asked, and Taehyung looked at him, eyes a little darkened in the bright sun. "I'm trying to make you do a lot, Jeongguk," Taehyung said, and Jeongguk quietened. This conversation, this harmony between every interaction they had, it was confusing, demanding too much of Jeongguk's attention. He'd never felt so close, yet far from a person. Never felt so discomforted, yet relaxed. Never felt so conscious, yet compliant. "Let's go shop," Taehyung suggested, looking ahead. "Shop, how ladylike of us," Jeongguk said, and Taehyung sighed. "Oh, Jeongguk, I wish you'd indulge a little more in the ladylike tendencies of yours," Taehyung said, looking at him. "I'd quite like that." he said, and then began walking down the pavement. Jeongguk almost ran to catch up, trying to walk at the same pace as him. W, what do you mean? You want me to be more ladylike? Ah, don't overthink the things I saw, Jeongguk. I fear you'll think the wrong things, Taehyung said. I can't help but overthink. You say a lot of things, Jeongguk said admittingly. A lot of things I don't understand. Things I wish to, and oh, Taehyung, you're all too confusing. I can't fathom a single thing about you, Jeongguk said, and Taehyung looked at me. I don't think you'd enjoy knowing much about me, Jeongguk, Taehyung whispered. Oh, I very much would, Jeongguk said, and then shook his head. I've never met anyone like you. You're so different, I must shamefully admit I can't stop thinking about you, Jeongguk said, and they were stood in the middle of the pavement, people walking past them. Why exactly was Jeongguk saying all this? He couldn't comprehend. Taehyung's demeanor just put him at ease. Taehyung looked at him, and Jeongguk waited for something cerebral to leave the mouth of the older. Something highbrow, intellectual, yet a smirk fell across his lips. Do you fancy me, Jeongguk? Jeongguk looked at him for a few seconds, and a coarse blush fell across his face, much too bright. He took a step back. What an awful, awful question to ask a man, Jeongguk said, eyes wide in shock. Taehyung laughed, and there it was. The sense of ease Jeongguk received at the airy tingles the laugh sent down his spine. You do, don't you? You fancy me, Jeon Jeongguk. Jeongguk hurried closer to him, putting his hand on his mouth in a rush. Don't be so loud, people might think you're serious. Taehyung looked at him for a few seconds, and the almost scary look on his eyes, perhaps resonating from the way his eyebrows rose, practically brought Jeongguk to another blush. Are you being serious? Jeongguk brought his hand down, and Taehyung looked at him for a few moments. He then gave him a quick smile. Of course not, Jeongguk. It was simply a childish joke. Jeongguk nodded hurriedly, and Taehyung then took a few steps back. Jeongguk felt an odd coldness take over him at the distance, but then the door of the boutique opened, and Rosie and Veronica walked out holding shopping bags. Rosie walked up to Jeongguk with a smile, holding the shopping bags, while Veronica handed them to Taehyung to hold. I saw the most beautiful dress. It was a little expensive, but I'll wear it a lot, I promise. In fact, it'll go splendidly with that hat I bought last month, and Rosie started and then paused. Sorry, I don't know why I'm talking so much. I shouldn't bother you with these things. Jeongguk looked at her. It's all right, you can tell me things. I'm sure it's a lovely dress, Jeongguk said, and then looked up and saw Veronica and Taehyung talking closely. Jeongguk felt a fear that they might leave, that another week or two will pass before he sees Taehyung again. Would you like to join us for lunch? We're going to that American diner that's opened recently, Jeongguk said, and Veronica and Taehyung paused to look at him. Veronica began to speak, but Taehyung cut her off. We're occupied today, Taehyung stated. Veronica gave him a strange look and then sighed. Taehyung, could you take your mind off work for a minute? We'd love to join you for lunch, Jeongguk. And eating in a diner, honey, it'll be like the one we visited in New York, Veronica said, and Rosie smiled, while Jeongguk felt hesitant. Taehyung looked a little aggravated, but Veronica turned around and walked up to Rosie, and Taehyung had no choice but to follow her. I'm sorry, I didn't realize you had work, Jeongguk said to Taehyung, and Taehyung shook his head. It's all right, he said, walking rather quickly. Jeongguk walked behind him. The two heard Rosie and Veronica chat until they reached the diner, where they stepped in and got a booth for all four. The checkered tiles and bright pink seats were almost unsettling. They sat down, and Rosie and Veronica continued to talk about non-trivial things, clothes, celebrities, other things that held no value to Jeongguk. He looked at Taehyung, who was silent, seemingly odd to Jeongguk since he'd always been so talkative. We'll be leaving tomorrow early morning. The cab will come to pick us up, Veronica explained. We'd be gone for a week or so, maybe less than that. Nonetheless, I do hope there won't be an issue. I'll get dinner from that fish and chip shop nearby, Taehyung said to Veronica, and Rosie frowned a little. Oh, how horrible. You mustn't deprive yourself of a good dinner. Taehyung shrugged a little carelessly, and Jeongguk piped up. Well, my classes end at 4 and I only work on weekends. Perhaps I could help you with dinner, Jeongguk said, and then looked at Taehyung. Aye, if you need it. Taehyung looked at Jeongguk for a few seconds and Rosie grinned. He cooks very well, Rosie added, and Veronica chuckled. How womanly, Veronica said, and Jeongguk's cheeks reddened at that and he looked down. It isn't like that, Jeongguk stammered quickly. I only cook sometimes, when I'm free, Jeongguk said, and Taehyung hummed and slid out from the seat to stand up. I'm heading outside for a quick smoke, Taehyung said, and then put his coat back on and headed for the door. Jeongguk looked at him with big eyes and got up as well, grabbing his coat and following him out. Rosie smiled, looking at Veronica. Oh, our husbands get along so well. Aren't you grateful? Veronica hummed, looking at her fingernails. Immensely. Taehyung's got a tendency to allure people. I'm afraid your husband's been charmed, Veronica said, and Rosie laughed. Jeongguk's too cold to be charmed. He's so distant sometimes, it's unnerving, Rosie said, her bright smile almost fatting. Taehyung's not distant, no. He can be, but of course we all can. In fact, it's good, I believe. We should all be a little distant from each other. Closeness is so overrated, Veronica said, and Rosie felt a little confused, yet nodded nonetheless. Jeongguk walked out of the diner. He looked and then found Taehyung standing right at the end of the block, behind the diner, smoking diligently. Jeongguk walked up to him. Are you upset with me? What could have given that impression? Taehyung asked, and Jeongguk looked away. There was a silence, and Jeongguk felt his fist tighten inside his pocket. Don't be angered with me. I'm not sure why you are, but don't be. I apologize for whatever it is I've done, Jeongguk said, and then tusked, looking away. Would you look at this? You're nothing but bewitching to every sense of mine, yet I've got the sense to upset you. It doesn't make any sense, does it? Jeongguk said, and then turned around. There was a silence, and then, you're too worried. Jeongguk gulped. It's only because you told me you're upset with me. I can't help but be worried, wouldn't you be? Wouldn't anyone? That's the reason why I'm upset, Jeongguk. Taehyung cut him off, and Jeongguk matched his gaze to his. Saw so much, understood nothing. You're too worried. Worried about what others may think, what others may do, what I may think, what I may do. Jeongguk paused, confused. Doubly, what do you mean? See, right there, Taehyung said, stepping closer. You're thinking far too much, Jeongguk. Jeongguk gulped. I didn't think I was just confused, because Jeongguk stammered, feeling small. Feeling insignificant in front of Taehyung, who knew so much, spoke so well, made Jeongguk feel so intimidated. Hey, Taehyung said suddenly, getting a little closer to him and putting his hands on his waist. Listen, I'm not trying to scare you or make you anxious, Taehyung said softly, and Jeongguk's eyes were widened. Jeongguk gulped. I'm Jeongguk began and then gulped. Taehyung, I'm confused, I'm sorry. Don't apologize, Taehyung said, and Jeongguk felt Taehyung's arms circle around his waist. Tell me what's on your mind, Jeongguk. Jeongguk mouthed for a few seconds, trying to grasp onto any thought he could put into words. But he was unable to, and he looked at Taehyung timidly. I don't know. I'm unclear on what it is you want me to say, unclear on what it is I want, Jeongguk said, voice so soft, so scared. That's okay, Taehyung said, their proximity growing closer. Don't think. You mustn't look for clarity. Find unity with your impulse, Jeongguk, Taehyung said, and Jeongguk put his hands on Taehyung's neck, feeling the warm skin in his cold hands. I know you don't understand, Taehyung whispered, and now Jeongguk's mind was cluttered. All he could see was Taehyung's eyes. All he could feel was his arms holding him. All he could feel was utter chaos emerging from the pits of his stomach. I know it's all too confusing right now. Jeongguk's breath was hitched, growing heavier by the second. But I promise it'll all make sense, Taehyung said, and Jeongguk shook his head. It never does. Jeongguk squeaked softly, and Taehyung couldn't help it. He pulled Jeongguk closer in, if possible, and now Jeongguk felt their noses practically touching. Don't fret. Little angel, Taehyung husked oh so quietly, and Jeongguk felt a whimper get caught in his throat. Give in. Their lips met. Jeongguk's mind roared in flames, and a spark of desire shot up his stomach, infiltrating his mind, body, heart, uniting him with his wanton yearning. He felt the soft yet rough touch of Taehyung's plump, warm lips against his. With this brought confusion, questioning, anarchy in his mind, every thought at war against the other, mind at war with the heart complete chaos until he couldn't comprehend the complexity of his own desires, so he pushed Taehyung away and stumbled back 5 steps. What Jeongguk started, eyes wide. What was that? What did you do? Jeongguk stammered, and Taehyung looked frazzled for the first time. Jeongguk brought his hand to his mouth, shaking his head. That was wrong of us, wrong of you, Jeongguk snapped, and Taehyung licked his chapped lips. Jeongguk. Don't speak my name, Jeongguk said, enraged. Not from your lips, I never want to see them again. You're a man, and I am one too. You must be insane, Jeongguk cried, and Taehyung kept silent. Jeongguk found no response, only Taehyung looking at him with an expressionless look on his face, as if waiting for Jeongguk's tantrum to finish. Jeongguk took a deep breath and ran off, finding it unbearable to continue looking at the man. Jeongguk ran into the diner, where he found Rosie and Veronica eating their food. Jeongguk ran in and looked at Rosie. Rosie, we must leave. Oh, Veronica asked, and Rosie's eyes widened. What happened? Nothing happened. We must leave in an instant, Jeongguk said, and Rosie nodded, looking at Veronica wearily and grabbing her coat. I'll see you tomorrow morning, Rosie said, and Veronica nodded in confusion. Jeongguk rushed out, and Rosie went with him, asking him many questions. Taehyung walked into the diner, seeing Veronica sitting by herself, looking no more than amused. They ran out, Veronica said, and then smirked. What did you say to the poor boy? Absolutely nothing, Taehyung said, and then grabbed Veronica's hand, helping her stand up. My allurement scared him, I presume. Veronica took some money out of her purse and chucked it onto the table, putting her coat on. As she did, she felt Taehyung's arm around her waist. They walked out, and she took the cigarette out of his mouth and put it into hers, smoking a drag. Taehyung leaned into a whisper. I'll fuck you nicely before you leave, yeah. Veronica smoked out, giving the cigarette back to her husband. Of course you will, she replied with a smirk, and Taehyung hummed.